Hello, everyone. So we'll get started. Thank you for joining the session. Today we're going to talk about user acquisition. So if you don't like this topic, better run now, because this is going to be the main thing we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about how to make your user acquisition work at times of, an economic slowdown, but also in the light of the privacy changes that already happened and the ones that are about to happen. And we're going to cover three main topics in this talk. The first topic, not a big surprise, I guess, is how to get your UA working given the privacy changes, or more like how to immune yourself from what that already happened and what is about to happen. So we're going to talk about that a lot, and first-party data in that context. The second thing we're going to talk about is how to diversify your UA to make it more durable to the economic situation that we have. And the third thing we're going to talk about, which might surprise some of you, is alternative billings and alternative stores, and we're going to talk about how that plays a very critical role in your user acquisition activity and how it really helps you across the board. So these are the main topics. Before that, a quick intro. I'm David. I'm based in Israel. I've been at the company for about 2.5 years now. I'm the EMEA sales manager from the user acquisition side of the business. What else can I tell you? Married, 5-month-old baby, and I really don't know how to segue from introduction, so we'll just use that as a segue for the main talk. So let's lay the facts. You wake up, it's 9 a.m., right? You drink your coffee, you open up your laptop, the Ross reports is downloading, and you see horrible results across the board. And you look like this, you facepalm. This is not a surprise, and you're not alone in this. It's happening across across the globe, across all verticals, and as you can see, the ROS is dropping significantly. And it makes sense to some extent, because in an economic slowdown, what we know is two things. One, users have less available income, so they purchase less, and also the average deal size, the average purchase, is also significantly lower. And the second thing we know is that advertisers spend less money given the economic situation, so the CPM is dropping, so your ARPU is dropping. So it doesn't matter if you're an IAP-based game or an ad revenue-based game or a hybrid, the effect is across the board, and you'll see those numbers dropping. The same number of dollars you put in 2021 do not generate the same return, even if you use the same channels and the same setup, unfortunately. Now, at the same time, we also noticed that because of all the privacy changes and also in the light of the situation, the job of a UA marketer has become much more difficult. And you don't need only to manage a campaign and to make it work. You also need to understand creatives, because with less data to work with, you need to be more savvy with the creatives you have. You need to be more domain specific. Each vendor now is a whole world. You have DSPs, you have ad networks, you have SAN, you have influencers, so many options. You need to be very domain specific. And lastly, really, privacy changes are becoming a big thing, so you need to be also aware of that. So it's really not easy to be a UA marketer. If you're sitting here, I guess that you can relate. Doing UA is not easy in 2023. And the last thing, really, and I think this meme is very well capturing this, is that there is no way around it. The combination of a slowing economy and a privacy change that is already, well in effect and is affecting iOS campaigns, and the upcoming privacy effects with Google's privacy and sandbox is really creating those difficult optimizations, and the campaigns are not as effective. So all of the privacy changes we've had is just making sure that you have much less data to work with, and this is also one of the reasons why we see the ROS dropping, not just a slowing economy, but also just the default situation where you don't have enough data to work with, and frankly, nobody really solved the puzzle yet in that aspect. Now, this sounds a bit depressing, right? But it's also a good opportunity. Because if you think about it, during COVID times, right, it was a horrible time, but everybody worked from home, and it became a big experiment. And nowadays, work from home became a thing because of the difficult situation. In a weird analogy, it's also the same case here, I think, because that difficult situation that the privacy changes and the economy slowdown has brought on us also forced a lot of companies to innovate and rethink how they do attribution, how they do UA, how they do their marketing. And because of that, we reached some very interesting conclusions. And I'm going to share with you these three, I would say, insights that we learned together with our partners and how this could potentially help you also in making your UA more effective. So let's talk about the first topic. The first topic is first-party data. When we talk about first-party data, it makes a lot of sense because you have less data to work with, so you want to get any data that you can lay your hands on, given the fact that you don't have identifiers. I usually divide it into three sections. So the three things we see usually is one is just sharing all the post-install data feed. For example, if you work with a DSP or a network partner and you have all the unattributed data, this is usually a very good data that you can enrich your campaign and the vendor with and make it more effective. The second thing we see as an example is data segmenting, and basically developers that collect data to segment users with consent, of course. And this also helps them enrich their campaigns and make it more effective given the current situation. The third thing, which is a bit surprising perhaps to some, is also some vendors that are trying to enrich the activity with their own data. So they're not saying to the advertiser, hey, give me your data and I'll help you. They're saying, I have some data of my own and I can help you with. An example with Digital Turbine that I think would be interesting for you is that we try to, in a way, help our advertisers by using the on-device integrations we have and help advertisers do attribution without identifiers. Think about it maybe as an analogy like an IDFV on the Digital Turbine ecosystem. So this is an example out of many that vendors are starting to also become more self-aware and provide more options for you advertisers to basically enrich your campaigns. So I think this is a very interesting momentum that these things are getting, and I think that this is only going to accelerate when we go deeper into 2023. Now let's talk about the second topic, which is UA stack diversification. This is also brought up quite often, and everybody is asking, which channels do I use that are not immune but perform better in these times, right? Because not all channels are affected the same way from the economic situation. And you really have a lot of channels. You have networks and search and influencers, all sorts of channels. But one thing that people don't always think about is targeting-wise, this is not the only thing that matters. So there's three main things in marketing that I usually like to think about. It's who do you target, when do you target them, but also how do you target them. Mostly the first one comes to mind, not how, but who do you target, not how and when. But there is one thing that we found out, that there is a specific influence to when you target the users and how you target them that is very durable in time of an economic slowdown and can make your UA very effective. And this is basically coming into the point of first device usage, or the first day of a new device. So let's talk about it a bit more. New device owners are quite unique. That's what we found out from a lot of research that we did. We found out two main things. The first is that it's really interconnected with life events. When you buy a new phone, it's usually associated with some kind of a life event that is positive. So for example, I told you I have a 5-month-old baby. And when you have a new baby, you want to have the best phone with the best camera, the best memory to take the best pictures. And we noticed that a lot of people buy phones because of this life event, or their parents or their family buy their phones for them when they have birthdays or when they have other good events, they moved an apartment. So more than half of new users, essentially, when they buy a new phone, they're experiencing a positive life event. This is really big for us because we didn't realize how impactful that is. Because when you want somebody to download your game, you need not only to know that they're the right fit as a user, they're the right demographic, the right profile, the right interest group. You also need to make sure that they're also in a positive state of mind and they will be more accepting. So when you're in a positive state of mind, we found out, you're more likely to download games, you're more likely to engage. And on the long-term cohorts, when you compare day 90, day 120, day 180, it seems that those users are different than if you would acquire them on Facebook or Google or other channels. But the second thing we found out about them, and this is also something that might surprise a few, is that there is a portion of users that only exist on the device homepage. there is a layer of people, like my dad, for example. He doesn't download games. He doesn't go to the App Store. He's not exposed to ads. He doesn't have a Facebook account. The only place for him to discover Candy Crush or to discover Uber is on his homepage. And when you download a game like that through the homepage, you also have a new layer of people that are usually very high-quality users that you just cannot find anywhere else. And those layer of demographic, those people, while not the majority, they can have a big influence on campaigns. So these are two very interesting facts that we found out about new users. Now, the other thing that we notice is that if you compare preload's experience, like experiencing, discovering new apps on a device that you just bought and opened, we notice that the effect or how important that is to users is tremendous. It's right there, like just below app search ads and word of mouth. It's really highly ranked in terms of the discovery. And this is coming to the third point of how you discover them. Because there's no ads, no manipulative X button that is somehow not closing the ad for some reason. And there's no friction. You just go and you discover the game without the manipulations. And users do appreciate that, and it seems like that is also affecting how they view this, this game, this app that they discover. They appreciate the fact that they discover it without all the process of engaging with ads. And the last thing is how this is translating to the actual numbers. And I think this is a beautiful graph that really shows it. They just engage with far more apps than they would ever engage with if they had an older device. So during the first 3 months of a device, they download more apps than compared to, let's say, 6 months after they bought the new device, which is really showing that this phase of a new device is really unique in terms of when you capture them, in what state of mind they have, what psychological state of mind they have. And I think that this is really interesting because it becomes more difficult to get users to download games and to download apps. And it basically gives you kind of like a window to capture them that is really a unique window, I would say, compared to many other channels. And the last thing about this, and this is, I'll be honest, a very surprising thing that I thought about a lot, and that is the agnostic user phenomena. And that is basically saying users don't really care about which app they have as long as it fills their need. So they have needs for a transportation app. They need a shopping app. And they need a game to play while they're commuting to work on the train. So what we found out is that as long as you fill their gap, they don't really care. It's not like you will put Uber, right, and they will switch it to Lyft necessarily. They will just stay with it. And if you download a match-free game, they would usually stick with it because they like this genre and they need something to fill the void. Users are becoming much more agnostic to the specific app that they have as long as it fills what they need. And this is a really interesting fact that I'm still thinking about even now when I'm giving you this talk, because it really makes you wonder how really users appreciate your game and when to capture them and how important that is to capture them when they have the new device and basically become their default app for that device. Now, the third thing that I'm going to talk about is the advantages on the device and a bit about alternative billings and stores. So we're going to basically skip this slide because I want to get to it. There is a big connection between alternative billings and alternative stores and UA. Nowadays, because of a lot of movements with regulation and the market evolving, we see a lot of companies really pushing hard on finding new ways to do IAP billing. Because when you lower that fee that you pay, the revenue that you get per user is higher. You can bid higher CPIs, you can scale, you can break the glass ceiling. And once you do that, it could really create a huge difference compared to if you just optimize a bit better. Because once you have that user revenue, when you have that buffer in terms of the user margin, it just makes your CPIs much more flexible. And we know that UA is not getting cheaper. We know it's only getting more expensive. So this is getting much more momentum. And I think that this is really incredible to see how much effect alternative billings and UA have together. The other two things that is important and interesting is that Alternative stores also have a kind of like unique position in terms of noise and in terms of discoverability. Because they're not as busy as the main stores, it's much easier to get discovered, it's much easier to get traffic. And we see that nowadays when it's really difficult to find good users, you just need to look everywhere. And the innovation in this space is really becoming hot. And it's exciting. I think that next year this is definitely going to be a very big topic. And we already see a lot of movements in that area. Now, I wanted to show you 2 more slides because when we talk about new users and their experience, many people don't really understand how that looks like. I usually compare them to creatives. So on an ad network, for example, you have video, you have banners, interstitial, playables. I think about it in the same way on on-device. So you can have a game hub, a store, a widget to engage with and discover new games. You can have something like a wizard that is basically giving you app selection menus. And if you recall from the agnostic slide, users don't really care about becoming more agnostic to the specific device type. You just need to get them what they need per category. So we give them a shopping category, we give them a gaming category, a social category, and we count on them using the device for a long time because, again, they're becoming increasingly more agnostic, and between us, also a bit lazy to an extent that they don't want to search too much and engage with ads. They want to get the app fast, and this is a very nice way to also get them to download and make the app a kind of a default app to use. And the last experience, which I'm going to show you, is I would say the most common pre-install experience, which is when you open the phone and you have apps on the homepage to engage with. This is the most classic way of engaging new device users. So if you combine the hub, the app select menu, and the pre-installs that you see here, you basically have a few flows that you can engage with. And the combination of those, a bit like creatives with an ad network, really make it a kind of a perfect campaign to optimize with and find the flow that works best for you. So we have a few more minutes, so let's summarize it briefly. So we talked about the UA stack and how much you need to diversify it, but you don't only need to diversify for the sake of diversification. I would really encourage you to also think about which channels are uniquely positioned in the time of an economic slowdown, and I think that I hope that the new device users make sense in that sense, given their unique timeline, the unique timeline in the device lifetime. It really makes a lot of sense to capture them at that moment, and in that user experience kind of, the user experience is obviously much more positive, so the when and how is really ticking on both sides on this kind of inventory. The other thing we talked about is the first-party data that is going to become more and more important, especially because nowadays Android is also going through the same kind of process on iOS, so there's nowhere to run. We're going to need to work with the first-party data to really make campaigns work better in this economic and in this industry where we have less data to work with. And lastly, I really encourage you to also challenge the way that you do business and think about alternatives to billings and stores, because those have a very deep relationship to your UA, and in many cases that could be the breakthrough to make UA work or to make UA scale more than just trying a different channel or optimizing slightly better. So these are the 3 tips we have for you. Hopefully you found them interesting. Feel free to drop by and ask us more, and hope that you enjoyed the talk. Thank you for listening.